The Finance Committee meeting to order. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Councilmember Filsa.
Here.
Vice Mayor Koo.
Here.
And Chair Du Bois.
Here.
For the record, all present.
Great. First item is oral communications, chance for members of the public to speak on something not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers? So
I
if you'd
don't see any requests.
like to speak at this time, raise your hand. Yep. Okay, I don't see any either. So we have one action item today, which is budget wrap up and recommendations for council adoption. And it looks like we have a presentation.
We do. Good afternoon, Finance Committee. Kylie Nose, Administrative Services Director. And before you this afternoon is hopefully a wrap up of all of our discussions over May 10th and 11th, ultimately resulting in a recommendation from the committee to the full City Council for budget adoption. That last action is scheduled for June 20th, which would be Council's last scheduled meeting before they go on break for the summer session. We do have an extended PowerPoint for you today. We acknowledge that the report came out late. So understanding that perhaps given the agendas from the past day or two and activities, the committee members might have been tied up. So Jesse Deschamps and Paul Harper will go through a bit of an extended PowerPoint to kind of walk through the memo, acknowledging not everyone might have been able to read it before today. After that, we'll help walk you through, but ultimately moving through the actions that the committee has tentatively approved, areas that you had placed in the parking lot, moving all the way through to some staff recommended changes for a final kind of package, I guess, for council consideration. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Deschamps and Mr. Harper. And I think at the end of their PowerPoint, I'll wrap up with a few other verbal updates that will also impact this. So with that, I'll turn it over to you both.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The item today is a fiscal year 2023 budget wrap up for the proposed operating and capital budgets and municipal fee schedule. The staff report for this item is linked to the agenda and can be found at the city website at the link at the bottom of this slide. Oh, slowly. Okay. Oh. There we go. All right. As part of budget wrap, we will review actions by the Finance Committee thus far, including adjustments tentatively approved to date, items placed in the parking lot for further discussion, recommended additional adjustments. We'll also review additional information as requested by the Finance Committee or provided by staff. This includes the review of fiscal sustainability survey results. As noted on this slide, the final Finance Committee recommendations will be included as amendments to the proposed budget for City Council adoption in June. Too far. Okay, as part of discussions on May 10th and 11th, the Finance Committee tentatively approved 3 adjustments. In the Office of Transportation, funding for the parking attendant or valet program will be eliminated in fiscal year 2023 in recognition of lower demand for parking permits and extra capacity in garages and lots. In the City Manager's Office, funding for the National Citizen Survey will be added on an annual instead of biannual basis. The annual costs for this survey are approximately $30,000. The funding is already included in the fiscal year 2023 budget, as this was a year that was expected to complete the survey. So staff will include ongoing funding beginning in fiscal year 2024. And lastly, in utilities, the Finance Committee approved the addition of 1 program manager to support business operations and initiatives in the utilities department. This was presented at the May 11th meeting through an App Places memo. So overall, these tentatively approved adjustments result in a $14,000 savings in other funds. As of today, there are 3 items in the parking lot for further discussion. In CSD, funding is included for the Youth Community Services Youth Connectedness Initiative and the United Nations Association Film Festival. Of note, the amounts presented in this slide reflect prior year costs and not a specific funding level that's recommended by staff or the Finance Committee. Also in the parking lot is the Planning and Development Services proposal for the Downtown Housing Plan grant. In total, this includes $800,000 in grant revenues and expenditures and an additional $150,000 in consultancy services. So overall actions in the parking lot result in a savings of $90,000 in the general fund. In addition to Finance Committee recommendations, staff has included several additional actions for consideration. These are listed here and include utilities water rate adjustments and realignment of water and fiber budget estimates in accordance with committee meetings that occurred in April. A revised fiscal year 2022 to 2023 reappropriation for capital projects as of May 2022. Several adjustments to capital projects. This includes $2.2 million for the substation physical security project to install security walls, perimeter lighting, and cameras at electric substations. It also includes $300,000 to award the Ramos Park project in fiscal year 2023 and is offset by a reduction in the administrative project. It includes additional funding in the performing arts project to replace seating at the Lucy Stern Theater. In total, $50,000 for design work will be included in fiscal year 2023 and $650,000 for replacement of the seats will be included in fiscal year 2024. Additionally, as part of Finance Committee discussion, staff recommends adding $18,000 to identify ownership of Barron Park Alley or Cypress Lane. This is step 1 of a 3-part process to explore ownership. Details of this plan are included in attachment E. And lastly, a technical adjustment to align the general fund transfer to the art fund. This is per requirements that limit the usage of art fee revenue to support administrative costs. So overall, this results in a general fund cost savings of $55,000 and an all funds cost of $31.3 million. And with that, I'll turn it over to Paul Harper to continue.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee. Paul Harper with the Office of Management and Budget. A number of items on this slide were covered in the previous slide in the table. A couple things to note on here. One additional change to the budget that is being proposed this year is related to a new Government Finance Officer Association or GFOA budget award requirement. This is to forecast the budget for 2 years beyond the next budget year, so 2024 and 2025 in this case, for all major funds or funds that are 10% or more of the city's total operating budget. For 2023, this includes 3 funds: the General Fund, the Electric Fund, and the Wastewater Treatment Fund. And attachment A of the memo has source and use statements for each of these funds that show 2021 actuals, the 2022 adopted budget, the 2023 proposed budget, and then forecasts for the 24 and 25 budgets or numbers based on what's in the system at this point. These statements will be updated for any changes approved through the budget adoption process and included in the final 2023 adopted budget document. The next 2 items listed on this slide, Jesse previously mentioned, are to adjust for technical corrections in the water fund for the water rate and for the CPI adjustment in the fiber fund. At the bottom of the slide, there's discussion again that was covered in the previous slide about the capital reappropriations. This is something that's done every year. Departments reevaluate the projects in May to determine what will be spent in the current year versus what's needed ongoing. The changes, as were noted on the previous slide, are about $27.6 million to be reappropriated. This does include the funding for the substation physical security project. The $2.2 million will be reappropriated from the prior year, but it's been called out separately because about half of the savings are coming from other projects in the electric fund. So Funding is being reappropriated of 2.2 million. 1.1 million is in that project, and then 1.1 million is savings in other projects in the electric fund that's been called out in the memo. And then lastly, the funding for the performing arts replacement for the Lucy Stern Theater is noted here as well. This next slide discusses the fiscal sustainability survey results. On February 15th of this year, the city began a survey requesting online and mailed feedback regarding the city's fiscal sustainability efforts. The highest ranked priorities based on the responses are shown here. They include maintaining basic services, repairing streets and roads, investment in community assets, adding public safety services, and funding affordable housing and homeless services. To be noted, through May 17th, there were 433 total responses, and about half of them, or 191, were completed through the mail. This just wanted to highlight this to say that people are still responding via mail, and it is, almost half of the responses that have come in. These responses have provided input on the budget development process as well as the ballot measure development process that's been going on. Okay. Continuing on the fiscal sustainability survey, community comments have also come in on a number of topics shown on the left-hand side of this slide. Areas with concentrated comments include improvements to city infrastructure, particularly the Lucy Stern Theater, prioritizing traffic and code enforcement, as well as general policing, and comments related to spending on specific programs such as sustainability and climate action plan and affordable housing and homeless services. This slide focuses on additional information items requested by the Finance Committee through the meetings on May 10th and 11th. There are a number of items on here, so I'll highlight them briefly, but additional information for each of them can be found in section 3 of the memo. The two items on this slide with the dollar symbol indicate items that have recommended funding adjustments for them, and they were discussed previously. These are both the Cypress Lane item and the seat replacement for Lucy Stern Theater. In addition, information in here included our city auditor recommendations for performance measures to be added to the department section of the adopted operating budget. The Office of Transportation has provided information regarding the status of the next steps for the bike and pedestrian plan, as well as investments made in the grade separation project. An overview of the SCAP program will be provided as part of the adoption memo presented to the City Council on June 20th. In addition, the transition of the discussion of the IT department transition from capital to operating expenditures has been provided, as well as their top contract expenses in attachment F to the memo. And then the memo also includes a discussion of pension and other post-employment benefits or OPEB contributions, including assumed rates and impacts from inflation, as well as information about updates to the city's website, document retention, and search functionality.
So actually, before we leave that last slide, just want to give the committee a few more points for update. There are a few items that are scheduled for the council's review between now and the end of June. So for example, one will be the review of the tree ordinance that's coming up, I believe, in early June. So as part of that memo, there are identified resources that would be needed to implement that ordinance. And so to the extent council takes action on that item and the resources necessary, then we would factor those into the budget moving forward. So just that's one. We have a labor contract coming up with our hourly employees is another one. So there are, just for the committee's awareness as you're planning for your recommendations, a few items before the council that will potentially impact the adopted budget or the budget brought forward for adoption, pending whatever council's direction may be as part of that review. Thought we should highlight that for you, acknowledging that the reports are not out yet, but just for your decision-making awareness. Okay, sorry about that, Paul.
So this last slide has the actions that staff is recommending for Finance Committee today, which are to review the work completed on May 10th and 11th and review the additional information and updates recommended in the attached memo. A draft motion is also included to recommend to council to adopt the fiscal year 23 operating capital budgets and municipal fees with the changes tentatively approved by the Finance Committee previously and any additional changes that are approved or tentatively approved today. This concludes the presentation. Kylie, did you have any other things you wanted to chat about before we go into questions?
I don't think so. As the committee wades through this information, happy to help provide guidance to move through it. Obviously, the three of you are rather seasoned at this, but as we move forward, ultimately, the blue part is hopefully what will guide any motions that the committee makes for council's consideration.
Yep. So if it's okay, I think maybe if we just step through the report by sections, and then if we have questions or comments. So the first section is the executive summary. So let's skip that, go to the details. So number 2 was parking lot items, YCS, YCI, UNAF, downtown housing grant. See if we can resolve any of those, I guess. Okay, yep. Let's go ahead and see if there's any public comment on the budget. So if anybody'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. Okay, not seeing any. Okay, so I think one of the discussions we had about like YCS and UNAF was really more about a policy for nonprofits. And yeah, the report mentions HISRAP, but that's a limited bucket of dollars. And then some programs are in it and some programs aren't. So I guess we could deal with these 2 items, which are pretty small, but then I don't know if it's part of the budget discussion. At some point, I think we should have a policy discussion about how do we fund things like this ongoing.
Absolutely. I'll leave it to the committee for that discussion. But ultimately, to your point, what's before the committee right now is funding for FY 2023 and or at the discretion, anything ongoing, or to your point, discussion from a policy perspective, perhaps that's a referral or for staff to follow up.
I could add a piece to that, Chair and committee members. I would note that in parallel with the budget hearings we're having here, we're also working with the city auditor on what's been, I think, called a nonprofit agreement audit. And we expect that audit will also highlight some of the across the board issues of interest in how funding agreements are established and any partnership expectations that are created through grants, whether they be and understanding that those expectations may vary depending on the magnitude of the dollars involved, and in some cases in kind services such as use of facilities. So recognizing that that's going in parallel, I think as the chair and Director Nozay pointed out, may be appropriate for the committee to recommend in the council to try to perhaps articulate if there is a broader program approach that the committee and council might suggest on a go forward basis for taking perhaps these immediate grant suggestions, and then how will that work in the future? Would you want to establish a broader umbrella through which grant making decisions could be made, or any other policy direction you want to give us? And I mentioned the nonprofit audit because coming out of that, we do expect we have some policy development work to do, and the 2 efforts could fit well together.
Yeah.
So let me ask a sort of a dumb question here, maybe. Looking at these 2 items, Youth Connectedness Initiative and UNAF, why would those not simply be part of the community services budget?
Might want Director O'Kane to chime in. I think from a context perspective, if you take, for example, a program like HISRAP, there's a framework established in the time frame for decisions to be made for how to allocate funds within that program to specific nonprofits. Here, if it were made a part of the budget without a program, then I think the questions in the future would be, what is the expectation going forward? Is it a direct, I'll use the term entitlement for the specific organizations? And if not, then what both performance expectations and decision-making would be expected periodically, whether it's every year or in whatever frequency the council would envision.
So project safety net is that HISRAP funded or it's not, right? So we have some things, again, HISRAP's like a limited bucket, gets split up. And then we have some things like Avenidas and teen programs that are outside of that. And so I guess, again, this question is for YCI. Do we just approve it this year and then suggest maybe, I don't know if it's a follow-up to this audit, that we determine, where that goes, if it's part of like project safety net or funding, or
Aren't team programs part of CSP?
Let's perhaps ask Director O'Kane to comment on that.
Thank you. Could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear.
Oh, maybe you don't have your mic. Yes.
Sorry. Sort of looking at a couple of these things, UNAF and Youth Connectedness Initiative, and they sort of, we have a bunch of things we do in community services that are kind of like this. We have recreation and programming and stuff in libraries and so forth. So why would these kinds of things, and then teen programs just came up, as why is this different from community services? And the city manager made an operational point about sort of timing, right? Which makes sense, but how different is this from things we already do in CSD?
Well, I think UNAF is pretty different. We have our children's theater program, but we're not doing any sort of film festivals or, things along that line. The money that we're contributing to that is putting up the banners on University Avenue, and then also co-sponsoring their space at Mitchell Park Community Center, so they don't have to pay for the space for like a 2-week period. With respect to YCI, that is something that community services could do. I don't think it's something we necessarily would do. We have a lot of successful teen programs, and I just don't know if we would do that same program in recreation if we could. But, I agree with what Mr. Shikata said, that my guess is the reason why we have a HISRAP program is because of multiple requests from nonprofits for money from the city. And so a process was put into place. So yes, these are 2 individual organizations asking for funds, but what happens if 10 more organizations come out of the woodwork and start asking for another $20,000 or $50,000? Then we're back to square one. That's why we have this process in place.
Okay, I understand. I probably didn't say that exactly the way I wanted to, which is, I understand that one obvious difference is that, city staff, city people on the payroll are doing one, and nonprofits who aren't on the payroll are doing the other. I was thinking more along the lines of not who actually does it, but where we fund it from, right. So
where the budget goes. Yeah.
Right, yeah, where the budget goes, and then some things could be done internally and some things could be done externally and so forth, but sort of under one big umbrella.
Yeah, so I actually thought, so UNAF, to me, maybe that belongs in the art fund budget. And again, I think it's different than, say, 10 random nonprofits coming out of the woodwork. This is their 25th year, started in Palo Alto. It's really a great film festival. So in terms of like non-permanent art exhibits or whatever we call it, I think it makes sense. And we haven't got to the item yet, but this special transfer to the art fund, looks like, was it driven by salary increases and then we wanted to keep the administrative percentage down, so we increased the funds to the art fund?
Yes, it's a stipulation that the art fees can only cover 20% of the administrative costs. And the administrative cost in that fund is a
Yeah.
program manager.
So it's kind of an interesting artifact. We give raises and then we have to allocate more money to art so that the ratio of the administrative portion doesn't go too high. But there's $14,000 there that my thought was, why don't we fund UNEF out of that? And, you know, and again, we could make it a policy call if the council wants to support this art festival, as a Palo Alto Art Festival or movie festival. YCI, again, my understanding is it started with a county grant and we matched that grant. We reached the end of that. Now the county has re-upped for, I don't know if it's 3 years or 5 years. And so they're looking to us to match it again. Right. And, you know, again, I haven't seen this audit, but the HISRAP process, you know, again, we had this limited bucket of funds in different categories, and then HRC allocates it out. But then we do have other things that are outside of that, like Avenidas and Project Safety Net. Things that typically cities do that we don't do, that we outsource to nonprofits. Right?
Sure. I actually think a really helpful reference point for the committee is in the operating budget on page 199. It has a list of the HISRAP allocation process contracts, as well as, for example, the payment for Avenidas, the support for Avenidas. And it also has the YCI. As I'm looking at this and as we're discussing, the one that's not on there is Project Safety Net, so we can look at adding that. But the intent of that page was to identify, to I think the committee's discussion of what are the grants or entitlements that are provided to partners across the community and the services that are being provided. I will say, both in the past nonprofit audit that the former auditor did many years ago, as well as in this one, there's much praise for the HISRAP process as part of it. And it actually asks the former audit, not the current one necessarily, but the former audit actually recommends that staff use the HISRAP process as an example for our support and management of nonprofits or other partnerships, because it's got a very good kind of oversight aspect of it, where there's the review process, there's KPIs, there's a check back based on those KPIs to make sure that kind of the funding is being used as desired. So just highlighting that as a prior finding, that an auditor has found that to be the ideal process. Not saying that we have to go that way, but just, I think, another aspect of the environment that staff's working within and reacting to based on some of that prior feedback as well.
Just make sure my understanding is correct, though. When we say HISRAP, those are dollars that the city gets from the state.
No, that's CDBG,
Oh,
and that's
okay.
federal funding. HISRAP is pure general fund
It's pure Palo
dollars.
Alto.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's an application process that happens every 2 years. It doesn't have the same regulations as CDBG does. CDBG has specific subpots, I guess, or
Yeah.
subdivisions of the allocation from the federal
Yeah,
government
So how does the city determine the total amount of money that it would put into HISRAP?
through the budget process.
Yeah, but like this year, we really weren't asked, like, do you want to increase the HISRAP funding, right?
Sure. And that would be something that a department would bring forward as part of kind of proposals and needs. Obviously, I would defer to Director O'Kane on prioritization. Obviously, this is a year that we're reinvesting in the organization and in the community, but not able to obviously hit every priority that we desire. You can also see, I believe, in that on that page 199, you can see what was requested of the aid as part of the grant process, as well as what was allocated. So that's the other piece of it. I'm sure there's always a desire for additional funding, and that's part of this process.
Right.
Director O'Kane, do you have anything on increasing the overall allocation?
No, I guess there's always a need in the community for more. Last year, as you know, the council allocated additional one-time funding that was for a one-year period, and that was expended by through several nonprofit awards. So I think, you know, there's always a need in the community for funding for nonprofit organizations. It would be up to the committee and council to decide if that would be, if they wanted to do that, and if that would be a long-term adjustment or again, like a one or 2 year adjustment.
Lydia, do you have any comments?
So listening to all of this, I just basically, with the county providing half of the funding, and in order for the program to move forward with specifically to a YCI, we want to make sure that it does move forward, which is why in a way, I don't quite know the process if it's applying for a grant under HISRAP and whether that might, where they might miss out on participating in the grant process, and then they won't get the funding that, the matching funding from the city, which is why we're asking it through here and not part of the HISRAP.
So could we make a motion that we suggest council approve the funding for YCI as additional HISRAP funds, and that going forward it'd be part of the HISRAP process? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and just for clarity on that, that would be an allocation of the, say, $50,000 for FY 2023 and any future funding beyond FY 2023 to go through the annual HISRAP allocation grant process.
And does that align them up with the 2-year cycle?
I actually don't know. Director O'Kane, if we were to do that in 23, would that allocate, and we would up the HISRAP allocation, which right now is at 572, we would up it by 50,000 in FY 2024, but they would go through the granting process.
That's right.
But
That's
is that
exactly what
process
you
next
said.
year, so they don't miss a year?
Right.
Do they miss a year because it's a 2-year granting process, or?
So we're in the second year of the 2-year cycle right now. So if they were awarded or given allocated $50,000 for fiscal year 23, then the next 2-year cycle starts in fiscal year 24.
And then what does staff think about this idea of proposing that we fund UNAF out of the public art fund?
I don't know if that's, we'd have to look into that because the public art fund is expenditures from that come from the Public Art Commission, and that's in the Muni code, that's how the allocations are done. So I'm not sure that would be the right process. And it's honestly, it's not, I mean, that what we're paying for is advertising, right? It's flags on utility poles on university.
Well, no, I think this is a request though for funds to the festival itself, right?
This was an action that the committee made, I think, to support ongoing, or rather to memorialize ongoing support that has been provided to the organization previously. And to my knowledge, that prior support has been for kind of banners, the light post banners and the like. So I think this would just memorialize that past practice if I understood the committee's actions.
Yeah, I think I've heard people talking about actually helping to fund the festival
I see.
beyond the
Actual cash
banners.
to the organization.
To the organization itself, understood. It would
In
be-
addition to
In addition
the
to the banners.
existing support.
So that's at the discretion of the council.
So I guess the question is if council sent a request to the art commission, I mean, what does that look like?
You could ask us to review, but honestly, the Muni code regulates our public art. So I
So,
don't.
yeah, I was just going to suggest we not make it any more complicated than it has to be, to the extent, again, that the committee and the council's interest is to provide an actual operating subsidy to the organization, that we proceed with that direction for this one time. And then on a go forward basis, we do want to look at how best to incorporate that subsidy with a citywide look at how partnership agreements with the nonprofits are put together and our responsibilities going forward.
So again, when we talk about the public art fund, just to clarify, so again, what we're coming up in the next section is this additional money to the art fund. So we're not talking about the 1% for art, right? This is additional money outside of that.
What I think we're hearing is that basically the entire operations of the Art Commission is an oversimplified way to look at it, right? The entire operation of the Art Commission is to disperse the art fund money. I think that's what I heard between the lines here, right? So they're not.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you weren't
stuff.
confusing the 1% for art. Like when the city puts money into the art fund, what is that for, I guess?
So just to clarify, the 1% for art that's in the capital fund, that's a specific capital project that gets set aside.
Yeah.
I believe the money that goes into the art fund is art fees that come into the city through art programs. And no,
And it's the budget to
Oh, through
run like
development.
our art center.
Well, or it comes through from private development. So we have our 1% that goes for our public,
Yeah.
our public improvements, and we contribute to public art. But if there's a private development,
I'm talking about outside of the 1%, like this additional 14,000 contribution. Isn't there a budget there that runs like the art center and just art programs? in
no,
general?
the art center and the art programs run through the general fund. The
Okay.
public art fund is specifically set aside for funds that are allocated based on our public
Okay.
art ordinance. And so that fund in particular is more geared towards the private side of public art. Oops.
Okay.
And so when a private development comes forward, they also have to invest in public art, and either they can allocate the funds to the city, or they can choose
Yeah.
to.
Okay. So I
invest on their own.
misspoke. I was thinking more about the general fund budget, which runs the art center, which
Got it.
is that a part of CSD? Right?
Yep, all that's part of CSD,
Yeah.
all that runs
So
directly
back
through
to
the general
Councilmember
fund.
Filsa's thing, I guess, is just part of the CSD budget.
For UNAP?
Yeah, basically.
Again, mechanically, I think we could do this in a number of ways, but it sounds like the suggestion is add it to the CSD budget. It's a direct subsidy to UNAF. And again, from a staff perspective, we'd want to, in this upcoming year, look at this among the other nonprofit assistance programs as we are rationalizing that pursuant to the nonprofit audit.
I would suggest just like a CSD administration budget, not like Ed said, confuse it by intermingling it with public art.
That makes sense to me. I think the issue here is, again, using this as an example more than anything else, right? Is that if council approves $10,000 for a subsidy to UNAF this year, well, I mean,
So
what
for-
about next year?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So is it going to come back to council? I'm sort of trying to get the council out of the. I'm trying to get the council, not to have to do as much work really. Right.
Yep.
Right. But it seems like we ought to have a process for that if it's going to be a regular thing, and the staff is much better at managing this kind of stuff than council. I mean,
Yes.
council, and you're going to have council people trying to pick which movies they show.
So you spent 45 minutes on $60,000. So, I mean, I think the conversation about the process is good, but
Right.
let's try to resolve it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, $10,000 this round, fine, right?
And so let me be clear, where that $10,000 figure came from is staff just looked at the cost for supporting the placement of the banners. If it's the committee's intention to support beyond the banners,
Yeah.
then I don't know that we actually have that figure. That would be something to be determined by the committee and council. So including that would be helpful as part of your motion.
I'll wait for Eric to come back. So if we're talking about the banners, and that's gone on for a number of years. Is that already budgeted for?
It's been coming out of contingent accounts historically. So either the council contingent account, the city manager's
Really?
contingent
So
account.
every year, it's contingent account. Okay.
Correct.
And do you know about how much it runs then?
About 10,000.
It's about 10,000.
Oh, okay. That's why there was the confusion if we were going to be using this 10,000 towards flags and marketing and okay, I get it. So essentially what we're kind of saying is 20,000 if we're supporting festival as well as their marketing and venues.
Well, the venue
Yes.
is much, sorry, excuse me.
Sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So the venue is much more than that, but that's not, it's about a $40,000 cost that we're providing to them. But I don't know if we have an estimate of the $10,000 of how much UNEF is requesting. I haven't heard that number, so I don't know. I think the 10,000, we might be getting confused with that number.
Okay, so but do we actually pay this $40,000 out of contingency, or we were just waiving
Well,
the
it's
fees,
the-
basically?
It's the value, so it's the value of the space. So we're not, it's just,
But
we're
there's
not
no
paying
like,
for it, we're just not getting it.
Right.
That makes sense.
yeah,
And again, just to be clear, I believe the 10,000 is actual expense for the installation of the banners.
right. Okay, so let me just try a motion, and I guess one thing we should talk about today is what will be highlighted to council in the report. And again, I think first, will all of the changes that we talk about today basically become in a staff report? Okay. So I guess the motion would be to add $50,000 for YCI to his wrap, and incorporate that into his wrap process going forward, and to propose funding $20,000 for UNAF, and that we would follow up on the nonprofit audit with a process for ongoing funding of nonprofit requests. And that 20,000 would be for the banners and an additional $10,000. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Lydia?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if I can take a head nod. All right, let's try to see if we can get through some things more quickly. So we had the downtown housing grant program. Again, $150,000 for 4 years. Any motions, comments, questions on this one? I mean, I still feel like the planning department kind of told us they don't really have the resources for it, but that we should maybe actually just go ahead and approve it since they're requesting it. Lydia, Eric?
Well, I was wondering if we approve it, then that is money that is sitting there just for that potential project.
Perhaps,
Or the planning.
The grant, the $800,000 grant.
yes,
Right.
if I could, Chair and Vice Mayor, ask Director Late to give us a quick update on where we stand with this project.
Thank you, City Manager. Council members, after we went to you and gave you an update on the grant, and you 4-3 vote approved the acceptance of that grant, our RFP closed, that allowed us to determine who might be able to work on that project for us. And we received no bids to work on the downtown housing plan. We surveyed some of the folks that had looked at the RFP, and they had indicated that they just didn't feel like there was enough time to respond to the RFP. And so we've recently relaunched it, and we've opened it up for, I think, 5 or 6 weeks to give firms an opportunity to bid on this project. One last note is, as we told you, I think back in April, our clock starts May 1st, basically, and it's a 3-year opportunity with a 1-year extension. It's probably not going to be until the later part of this year before we can activate this project if everything goes forward. One last note, and I think that I just said that a moment ago, but if you fund this, we're still waiting to hear what the results are on the from the RFP, and if the numbers are higher than we anticipated, the council would have an opportunity at that time to decide not to pursue the project. So just to have that awareness, even though you'd be authorizing it now, you're not. You'll have another chance to commit later.
So if I were to add, this is one of those projects that I think we're afraid to start because we know the magnitude of effort that's involved, and as Director Lake pointed out, the response from the consultant community has not been strong, to say the least. That said, I'll go out on a limb here and say if we don't fund our support to make the project happen, we've certainly killed it. And as much as it scares us all with respect to the work ahead involved in delivering this project, I have to say that the confluence of this, along with the increase of funding that seems to be going into transportation now, does make this the time that if we're going to take this on, it's the time for us to take it on. So would offer that, and maybe offer a little more enthusiasm to say, I actually think we should proceed with this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely kind of reacting to the, distinct lack of enthusiasm. So remind me again, so let's say things go really great. We get a great consultant. We use the grant. Great. But if we get a consultant that comes with a plan that we don't like, what happens? Do we have to pay back the $800,000?
Believe we do not, because it's a pay as or fund as you go contract.
So we just we're like motivated to use the money, but obviously we want to use it productively. So, okay.
I'm not sure how to ask this, but how constrained is the span of what we can do with this? Could there be a transportation element to it, for example, right? Or is it really fixed and cut and dried?
So there are some specific parameters related to the grant, but the fact that it has this proximity to Caltrain is one of the factors that is part of it. But we're not going to be able to make that 100% pivot, to support the transportation initiatives. 2, it would be a different project description, which we'd have to get MTC to support. And 3, I'm not sure the budget accommodates what you have in mind. As it is, $800,000 sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But we've got this narrowly scoped out to focus on housing downtown. So if it's anything other than that, then I think that's a different project.
And I suspect we would need to add funds. We would need to add transportation funds in order to really make it more focused on transportation, or add any additional elements related to transportation.
Question. So the 800,000 is a grant, and the way that, and it's based on reimbursement. So the city uses its own money, and as we use it, we submit for reimbursements. And this is how, if we don't complete or satisfy this grant's requirements, then potentially we could be out some money.
Just don't
Yes,
get
that's true.
reimbursed, I guess.
We just don't get reimbursed for some money, right?
Based on, upon completion of specified tasks, we would submit a reimbursement. We would typically get that, provided we've done our job on that. If it drags on and we exceed, our work exceeds the timeline for which the grant expires, we will not be able to submit reimbursables for that. And so there's we would also be motivated to get it done so we can get reimbursed, but there's that chance that we're not done. And we have to, if we want to finish the project, we would have to find general fund dollars or another grant if that's available to help fund it.
Any motions? Right. Like I said last time, we're the three that voted against it, so. But again, I've kind of changed my mind. I would vote to go ahead and move forward. So, all right, so that's my motion, that we go ahead and move forward with this program. Yeah. Okay, so those in favor? 2-1. Sorry. Okay. No, it's 2-1 with.
That was a no.
Okay, I wasn't sure if an oh was an answer or no.
I second to vote against it.
You can, make it 1-2.
What happens if it's 1-2?
It doesn't pass out of committee, so it doesn't make it to the full council.
Yes.
But doesn't this have to go to full council anyways?
It would, yes.
Right, yeah.
Okay. So the next one, long range financial plan, is really just change the reporting, correct?
Yeah, it's
Yep.
it's including those source and use statements for those major funds. And it is, yeah, just a change to the way we're reporting on specific funds within the budget document.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess we're moving to section 3 here, additional staff adjustments. So again, back to the public art fund. So again, this is a weird wrinkle. Like, why do we have to add the 14,000? Why don't we just keep 14K from the next 1% for art to balance out the budget of the fund?
I'm not sure I'm fully following.
So the way I read this thing, we're trying to keep our administrative expenses below a certain percentage.
Correct.
But most of this fund comes from 1% for art, right?
Correct.
So why don't we violate our policy for a few months, and when the next project comes in, we keep some of that money to make the ratio go back in line. Like, why is the city on the hook to fund this gap?
Because I believe per the public art code that only a certain percentage of the funds can go towards administrative costs. And when we do that math, when we do that calculation, the costs for administration exceed that threshold. And so we need to make sure that we remain within our kind of policies and procedures around this. So I'm going to make this up, but let's say for every $1 of public art funding that comes in of the 1%, that the city per its code can't spend more than 40 cents. So every time staff does the revenue estimates, they'll say, okay, here's $1, no more than 40 cents of that dollar can go
Yep.
towards it. So we can't,
So is this an ongoing structural problem that every year we're going to have to
And we have
pay?
been. We have been for at least as long as I can remember.
Okay,
And just happens that since a lot of things were moving, we didn't officially true up the value that needed to be transferred by the time we got the proposed budget released.
Okay.
So
but the rate has gone up every year going forward, sounds like.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so really no decision there other than changing the administrative expense policy.
I mean, your two options are either change the admin expense policy or direct staff to find reductions in the cost to administer the program. But I'll
Yeah.
tell you, this is one full-time position, so you would really be significantly altering the makeup of administration.
If you guys have comments on any of these, and number 3, utility position ad.
And the committee already tentatively approved that one position.
Yep.
Great.
So I have a similar comment on the fiber. So if I understood this when I read it, we're forecasting that the CPI cost adjustment will actually decrease revenue by $100,000. Is that right?
Dave, are you on the
Yeah.
line to help? Thanks.
Yes, Dave Young, Utility Strategic Business Manager, Council Member Du Bois, or Mayor, or Council Member, sorry. Yeah, there is 2 actually corrections in that fiber adjustment. There was a CPI increase of 4.2%, and that was equivalent to like 42,000 across or maybe 30,000 across this EDF1 customers. And the second correction was just aligning our revenues with our current forecast. We had originally budgeted some customers that are no longer with us, so we had to reduce that revenue stream by 130,000. So there's a net impact or decrease of 90,000.
Okay, so maybe they're not related, but it made me think that because this isn't a regulated utility, should we really be increasing our rates by CPI? Or do we, get to a point where we're just not market competitive?
So the
Yeah.
EDF1 rate is a contractual agreement. It was a promotional rate that was created back in, I think, 2009 or 6. And so there's only like 5 customers remaining on that rate. So the whole point with the CPI increase was to get them to the EDF3 rate, which is the market rate for the rest of the customer. And that rate hasn't changed since 2006.
Got it. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Any other comments? Going on to page 7. My only comment there was with the capital project reappropriations, maybe splitting it out. I mean, putting it into that one table, it was mostly that, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, it kind of comes up every year. It's like, how accurate is our capital spending forecast? And again, but it doesn't really have any real impact, right? We're just kind of rolling it over if we don't spend it.
That's correct. It's purely the ability to forecast and project expenses and how far a project will go by June 30th of any given year.
I mean,
and if we're off by a day, it carries over for July 1.
I mean, 83 million seems like a lot to be. Right? But
Paul, I think it's in line with our prior kind of practice in terms of this. I do think that it highlights that our appetites are always a bit larger than our stomachs can handle. And I will say staff did make a concerted effort as part of this 5-year CIP plan to really do a better job of kind of spacing it out, acknowledging capacity and timing.
so I think that's going to be a big question at council, especially with the wastewater projects. And so again, maybe in that table, not pulling that out of the table and just having it be there separately might be a good idea.
Okay. I think just one, if I heard you right, Chair, it's the idea of just having one table that shows all of the reappropriations.
Yeah, this table on page 4 or page 2 of the report.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bunch of this kind of small stuff in one $25 million item.
Yep.
And then the letters from Stormwater, PTC, those are typical. There's like the Stormwater one wasn't a change or anything, was it? And then the discussion about the fire training center. It sounds like PTC wanted to move that forward, but fire doesn't want to. Is that right?
I don't know that fire doesn't want to. I think it gets back to the question of capacity and us trying to be realistic in when staff will be able to get to different projects.
Yeah.
And so just based on the pipeline, staff have planned for the design work to be done in 2024, I believe. And of course, I think we would all like things to move up, but there are other options that the fire department is exploring, like the Cube temporary training facility, as well as potentially neighboring jurisdictions facilities.
Yeah, so when it talked about overtime for training, that would be temporary.
Until we decide what the ongoing training facility access would be, whether or not we build our own, whether we partner with another agency. But in the meantime, if we don't have the facility necessary for training, what that was trying to allude to, or rather clarify, is that the chief would obviously continue to ensure our fire staff is trained, but it may require them to go to a training facility outside the Palo Alto jurisdiction, which would incur overtime given the travel time and the like. Chief Blackshire, did you have any other feedback on that?
No, I just wanted to be available in case they had other questions, but you covered it quite nicely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have any other questions kind of continuing through the report? I think, I don't have anything till we get up to like grade separations. Which is page 12.
And Chair Du Bois, as
Yep.
you're moving into section 3, this section doesn't necessarily have recommended adjustments contained within it. These were really the areas that the committee identified as either additional information being desired or to be highlighted for the council as part of the adoption memo. And so we're trying to start to gather all of that information, obviously. And so much of this we would continue into that adopted memo as areas for highlighting based on committee feedback.
Yep. And so for grade separations, the report rightly says it could be $1 billion in total. I would categorize the money we've spent so far as early planning. I mean, we're not actually doing detailed planning yet. So I don't know if staff has an opinion if, 5 million out of $1 billion is a reasonable amount to have spent for early planning. But I think the point of this report was just to say, this is how much we've been spending, and just maybe remind council that the total is inching up, right? So, right. Yeah, and I mean, we started to really eliminate alternatives and things, but so again, I don't know if anybody has a feel, it was 5 million out of $1 billion.
Well, I just to chime in really quickly, sorry, Philip Cami, Chief Transportation Official. I mean, close to $5 million might seem like a lot of money, but in reality, these projects will likely exceed $1 billion, and so that is actually a relatively small amount in the grand scheme of the projects. But I do think a lot of important work has been done in creating concept alternatives, getting community outreach progressed, and having council move towards either selecting a preferred alternative or moving towards selecting preferred alternatives for these locations. And noting that we have 350 million approximately of 2017 dollars that it's already been committed out of Measure B funds towards this project.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, this is really rail committee stuff. But, you know, when are we going to get to a fundable project for at least one crossing? So I think, are we going to get there in fiscal 23, or are we going to be a year from now? We're going to be sort of saying, well, how much have we spent so far, and where are we?
Right.
Well, I actually, just to note, I believe that we actually now have permission from VTA to start spending the funding that is allocated in the Measure B grade separation dollars, noting that we've been using Measure B funding already for this project.
Right.
But we just received permission to start spending Measure B grade separation dollars on this, the phase of studies that we're working on now.
You don't have to cry about it.
Yeah, apologies. I've still got my daughter's still testing positive right now.
Uh-oh.
And I think both to what you were mentioning, Chair Du Bois and Councilmember Philseth, when you do look at the 5-year CIP for grade separation, this does continue to escalate. So if no progress was made and we keep continuing to spend, let's call it pre-planning dollars at the pace that we have been, and again for the next 5 years, you will be up to something like a $10 or $14 million investment in pre-planning.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of the components that the committee was discussing and wishing to highlight.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, again, when you write it up for staff, maybe
Add that piece.
summarizing a little bit about this would be good.
Sure.
And thank you for the work on the Barron Park Alley. So if we move forward and this is actually owned by private owners, I guess question is, can we force them to maintain the alley, or they would, you know, dedicate it to the city? But what would happen if these private owners own the alley and somebody develops a building that blocks the alley? Could they do that, or is it an easement for access?
I believe we have an easement. I believe there's a utility easement there, so we would be able to prevent them from blocking it. And I think with fair certainty that any development plan would need to accommodate improvements to maintain that access.
But if we go through this title search and we don't expect, I mean, what would the first step be, to go to them and say, hey, you own this alley, you need to maintain it? Or, well, you know,
I think it depends on what we find, and we'll be able to develop a strategy on that basis.
okay. And okay, are you guys good with the 18? And then again, I don't know if you guys agree on the IT budget. Thanks for pulling that attachment together. What do you guys think about changing the way you report it in the future? Maybe just breaking that out, part of the expenses.
Yeah, I think we have in general on our due out with the CIO to really relook at how we plan IT, both from a capital and operating perspective. And pending that, I think staff has heard the feedback of clarity and visibility into the large expenses is ultimately the goal. So I think we have our due out to figure out what works with our financial reporting requirements, as well as with the visibility desire. And so we can factor that into our ongoing work.
I feel like I'm doing all the talking. I think the SCAP overlay was fine. So the pension trust contribution. So I think the way you have it worded here is good. I think, is there a policy question for the council that, you know, we want to follow these ALM studies, or was it that the finance committee met and talked for a long time and picked the 6.2 right? So, you know, what really is the policy? And again, I don't know if that's necessarily a budget discussion, but we have this budget decision about, are we going to 5.3 or not? So do you have any thoughts about how we would talk about that in the budget meeting with council?
I also see Councilmember Koo has taken her mic off. Vice Mayor Koo, did you have feedback or?
I think I took it off for Cypress Lane, but then Tom covered it, so thank you.
No problem. Just I want to make sure we're tracking everybody. As for pension, I think it is a policy call. You're absolutely right on how to determine and what guides that lower discount rate for the proactive funding. And so we can tee that up for the council, identifying as it, you know, like you mentioned, as it's written here, and that ultimately it is a call on whether or not we would want to move to the 5.3. I do think that this current proposal only recommends allocation of 50% of what it would take to get there. So perhaps depending on how the committee feels about this, whether it's you agree with moving to 5.3 or somewhere between 6.2 and 5.3 is the discount rate. The fact that only 6 months is there hopefully helps with the financial decision on where to appropriate the funds and gives the committee and the council time to make the policy call on whether ongoing what the rate would be from a funding perspective. So
well, so I guess as part of the budget, do we want to propose that we formalize this consultant's rate as policy going forward? I think it'd be great if you converted partial payment to an actual percentage. Like, so are we effectively going to like 5.8 this year? You know, what's the effective?
can we do that? I think we might be able to
Yeah, I mean, we're paying
guesstimate
50%
it. Yeah.
of 5.3, so it's really a different interest rate, right?
Yep. So yeah, we could do that and equate it to what that would be. And I think the other piece for council consideration, depending on where this committee is at, is these funds are recommended in a reserve. So you have essentially kind of 3 options on what to do with this reserve. Either you leave it in the reserve and you recommend it stay there for the full council to be revisited later on during 2023 for formalization of what the new discount rate would be and allocation of the funds. You could recommend to liquidate the reserve because you think 6.2 is the right answer. We don't need to do any additional funding, so let it go. Or you could choose to say, I think 5.3 is the number. A 6-month or a 1-year phase-in is the appropriate path. So allocate those funds to all the departments and execute. So those are kind of 3 options for the committee in the recommendation to the full council. And it kind of just depends on, from a policy perspective, how strong your desire is to execute on this versus give yourself room to revisit it.
It sits in the reserve. If it sits in the reserve, you're talking about the BSR, right? So it's gonna, I mean, it's not gonna be that long, but it's gonna earn 2% or something like that, right? As opposed to the section 115, which is 5 or 6.
Correct. Although I don't think our section 115 is at 5 or 6 right now. Just in full disclosure.
Not now, but it was last year, I think.
Yeah. Full transparency.
So again, I think if you so this report comes out every 4 years, is that what we're saying?
The ALM study happens every 4 years, and our pension funding policy requires staff to return every 3 years.
And you're saying, is it one consulting company that's doing this? This Wilshire Associates?
I think it's multiple.
It's multiple. It's a survey of multiple experts on their projections for market returns.
So it's like a consensus estimate for
Yeah, it's
10 years.
a median of the survey.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking if we said we recommend we use interest rate 5.x, whatever it kind of works out, the math works out to for this year. We put that in the reserve, and that we would formalize the rate and policy later this year in terms of whether we adjust to the ALM every 4 years or so.
I would support that. I don't know whether it's 6.2 or 5.3. So if we pick one in the middle, then
which is what
we're
they
less wrong.
essentially proposed.
Right.
I mean, I don't think it's actually any change. We're just stated a little bit differently.
I think what you both stated will get you to the same place. And the way in which I think both of you are processing and the logic to get there are from different perspectives. But that's also the mark of appropriate analysis and perspective when we're looking at very uncertain forecasts. Always really wanting to kind of see what are the different angles in which we can look at it and what's the general consensus for a path forward.
So we're going to propose to the council that they refer this back to finance. Is that right?
It sounds like the referral would be a referral back to Finance Committee for solidifying whether or not the city should peg to CalPERS's independent consultant ALM review findings as part of its pension funding policy. So that's the piece I think that would be a referral. And then the question is for the funding that is already set aside in a reserve, does the committee recommend the council actually execute on that at the 5 point whatever the number is? Or does the committee recommend we leave it in reserve pending that discussion, the follow-up discussion on use of the ALM or syncing with ALM, and then make a decision later on the use of the reserve? Sorry.
So again, I think I would support, we use an interest rate of, you call it 5.x, whatever it is for this year, and we put that in the trust. Okay. Lydia, you have any
Yes.
comments?
No, I agree.
Okay, and then again, we would also recommend coming to finance to formalize the policy around use of this 4-year forecast, whatever.
Great. And so how staff would execute a motion like that would be when we come to the full council for budget adoption, we would actually liquidate this reserve and recommend appropriation of those funds across the department so we can actually make that transfer to the PARS account.
So why is there a reserve at all?
For this conversation.
Okay.
It's a lot easier for us to pull in or pull out of reserve as we're moving through the decision-making process. And once the committee came to a decision, then we can implement it.
Okay.
So pure policy discussion.
And then kind of moving on, I think we talked about the catch-up. The discussion about discount rate assumptions, was this kind of an early preview of the OPEB discussion?
Yep, so we will be coming back to the committee on June 7th to talk about our upcoming OPEB actuarial valuation. This is a preview of it with the sensitivity analysis and kind of where we're at. And it'll be the same conversation that we're having on the pension side. What do we actually think these long-term investments will earn, and how do we choose to fund? And one of the pivot points that we'll see on this upcoming valuation is this happens every 2 years, and we happen to be on a year where everything has kind of gone in a positive way. So medical costs haven't escalated as we would have projected or expected, frankly, and investment earnings are off the charts. So really, we are a lot further. not last week, but through the end of fiscal year 2021, which is the year in which, or the benchmark in which this study has been based on. And so really what we're going to have to do is grapple with the fact that both of these metrics have swung so far in the positive direction, and whether or not that will be an ongoing trend that really our actuarials will be here to discuss with you. They don't know. And so it has placed us in a position where looking at sensitivity analysis, as well as kind of what's our normal cost and our unfunded liability, will become a policy call of how much of the upswing do you want to acknowledge versus how much do we want to mitigate potentially a downswing after we perhaps have 2 years where we don't have every metric moving in our favor.
How does the discount rate and inflation interact? Like, do they add together?
The discount rate is actually a combo of inflationary estimates as well as earnings in the market.
So inflation is good from that perspective? I mean, it seems like they shouldn't really add together like that, but.
Sure, on the OPEB side of things, I don't want to say that it's net neutral, but kind of from a forecasting perspective, since the discount rate is a combination of both inflation as well as your earnings in the market, the actuaries use the same inflationary estimate that they're using in the discount rate on the expense side. So if you had a 2.75 inflationary rate as part of your discount rate, they're also assuming that on your expense side in terms of your costs going up. So they're assuming and estimating and forecasting, basically, both of those are moving in tandem.
Okay.
So,
but like maybe we saw under COVID, healthcare costs didn't go up as much, right? So
correct, which was a unforeseen change. And obviously, we don't know if that's going to be lasting.
Okay.
Because obviously there was significant federal funding that was infused into the medical healthcare system over the last 2 years. And so we don't know how that's going to pan out long term for rising medical costs.
So the discount rates in these tables include the inflation. So that's
Yes.
why we don't see a 5.3 discount rate and a 4% inflation rate.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so we're nearing the end of the report. So the discussion about the web search. I guess it wasn't clear, the 90,000 documents, does that include the documents in the document retention system, or are those different documents? Because again, like the top part, when you search, it doesn't seem to include a lot of documents.
Should we see if Megan can respond?
Do you know? Or-
Yep, I'm giving her time. Megan,
here.
thank you for joining.
Hi, everyone.
So yeah, if you could provide us clarity on that 90,000 documents figure,
Sure.
that would be helpful.
It is existing documents that are uploaded to the website. So it could mean on specific pages, reports. It could mean an annual report for the police department or independent police auditor, past reports, other PDFs like that are uploaded to the website.
So it's
separate than the document retention program, which will be a significant additional amount of documents that
okay.
are available.
But the website can handle some PDFs. Is that what you're saying? But not all PDFs?
It does handle some PDFs.
Okay. Again, we'll hopefully when we launch the document system, we'll just see. But it seems, see how it works. It's having like kind of two separate searches.
Yeah, if you look at the majority of other cities, they typically don't have a document search as part of the website search because it impacts overall search function for the website itself. You'd get just an overloaded amount of specific documents that could not relate to your search at all, but have a keyword that relates to what you're searching for. So that's why we're doing this dual system.
Yeah, I mean, there's the last sentence there in the middle about the evaluating resources to audit the search function. I think, again, a website is a great place to use a web survey because it's actually your audience. So I think it's something we could ask people, are they finding what they're looking for?
And we do have that already as part of the website. There's a feedback feature, and it's on every single page at the bottom in the footer, and it's also at the top of the page under feedback.
Okay.
So we do receive a significant amount of reports on broken links if there are some, or search, or they just can't find something, and we direct them to where that is. And then we do look back to see if the page has search terms related to it, or if they don't have any search terms, then we make those updates and evolve our approach accordingly.
Okay. So did anybody have any comments about things that weren't in the report? Or any of the attachments? I think the only comment I had after I read this report is, and by the way, Rumi, you left us, so you should use your cookies for recruiting. And they said they do. But a big part of the discussion of the 2 days was about staffing, and payroll is a big part of the budget. So I actually think we should capture some of that discussion about the recruiting process, maybe like openings per department. Well, like maybe even like a table of people per department, the number of openings and the number of new requests for people. And maybe some discussion around kind of what our funding for recruiting and staffing is, because I just think they're going to be questions just given the number of openings. So again, I don't think there's any recommendation or change, but I just think you'll save some time if we summarize that.
Just more visibility to the issue. Yeah, we'll do.
Well, Eric and Lee, have anything else?
My thought is, with the utilities where there's a lot of CIP and very big projects, I was thinking highlighting that as well, because I think, we have some rate increases, but in addition to hiring, there are these big projects that require retrofits and rebuilds. So maybe highlighting that as well.
And when does the fiscal sustainability results, are those going to be coming out?
So the staff is working on the direction the council provided on April 25th regarding the fiscal sustainability and potential 2 ballot measures. So on June 13th, staff is expecting an action item with the council that will provide the poll results from the round 3 statistically relevant poll, or statistically significant, thank you, poll. And then obviously we will probably shortly here cut off the survey responses for it online and give a final readout of all of the responses as part of that. Staff will also be bringing back the draft ordinance for council's review based on this committee and the council's actions on the potential tax measures to date, as well as some final analysis that the council had asked for. So it'll be a big item, but ultimately that's where the next kind of readout and final readout, frankly, of those engagement actions will be brought forward.
And then you mentioned the labor agreement and the tree ordinance. So what would the source of funds for those be?
Well, 2 potential options for those. Obviously, as part of this, we outlined that there were funds left in the budget stabilization reserve above the 18.5% to the tune of $100,000 to $800,000. We anticipate that both of those items could be allocated within that. The other action for this committee to review on June 7th is actually the OPEB report. And as we noted, with all of the positive swings, we are expecting our costs to be lower than projected for OPEB, which would also create some level of savings potentially, depending on how conservative the committee wishes to plan.
Okay, but that's going to go to the full council, right?
The OPEB report or?
No, I guess the labor and tree ordinance costs, right? That'll be in the budget that goes to council.
Yes, so those will both be separate action items with, or I guess, action and consent items with the full council in June. And pending the council's decision and motion on those, we would incorporate any changes from there in the final adoption memo. So ideally, everything will be wrapped up in one neat little package with all of the adjustments that the committee has recommended thus far, as well as any council actions that have been taken. The last date that we'll be able to incorporate will be June 6th.
Okay, so I think the only thing left is to adopt the staff motion, right?
So I think then, let's see. If the clerk can pull up the staff motion, which is adopt the 2023 operating and capital budgets and muni fee schedule as amended by the items on slide 3. Perfect. And then under B would be the action or the adjustments that the committee's taken a vote on. So that would be, yep, you got it. 50,000 for YCS for YCI, the 20,000 for UNAF, the allocation of the, you have the downtown housing grant plan, the allocation of the pension trust fund reserve, and referral to come back to determine the proactive funding. And then the second action is to approve the capital improvement plan. So I think,
and things like adding some of the discussions we talked about, like recruiting and stuff. Do you guys have that?
I think so, but it is ultimately, if the committee wants to memorialize that, you're welcome to say highlight as part of the.
I mean, again, the
adoption memo.
staffing one I think is important, but then we also had some other feedback on the reports to council, right? I'm just assuming you captured those.
Sure, and I think unless if it's already all those items in the wrap-up memo, and then the additional feedback that the committee has provided today, we'll adjust the items in the wrap-up memo, synthesize them, and make sure that those are highlighted in the adoption memo. So I would say if there's anything besides what's in the wrap-up memo and recruiting that you feel is empty or a gap, please let us know. But
yeah, I think those were the things I had. Yep. Lydia, any second?
Sure, second.
All right, all in favor?
Yes.
Okay.
and we're going to make one correction to the motion. The 1.3 is the general fund, not all funds. So D 1.3 million costs in the general fund. Perfect. Great.
All right.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, departments who are all out there.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah. There's a lot of people online.
That's right.
All right.
Have a good day.
Bye, everybody.